Hello, welcome to Los Comics TV. I'm your host, Javier Hernandez. Okay, so it's been a quick month, right? We're already here at, January 30th? First month of the new year, just about done. So, a lot coming up for everybody as a whole and individually. So anyway, let's get to our new episode here. So these two books, I just got them in the mail yesterday. They came at the same time. Well, obviously, the post... No, actually, they didn't. One came from Amazon. The other one came through the post office. I went outside, and there they were. It's like, hey, the books are here. So, these are two books on Steve Ditko, comic book artist Steve Ditko, which I know I've talked about on the show before. These books are... they weren't planned to come out at the same time, but they were worked on around the same time, and whatever happened, the schedule, and then, like I said, I ordered them at different times last year, I think. This one, I think I ordered last summer. And it was still in production, whatever. It was not like it's late. It's like, okay, pre-order it, and then this one I also ordered, I think, late last year. Like I said, by coincidence, they just landed the exact same day, so... I'm not going to review them because I have not read them. Like I said, I just got them. Definitely, these would be the next two books I read, one at a time, obviously. But I do want to talk about them a little bit. But I want to, so these are new books. I'm glad to have them for my Steve Ditko library. You guys know I'm a big fan of his comics work. The original artist on Spider-Man, the co-creator of Spider-Man. Creator of Doctor Strange, you're probably aware of his Doctor Strange artwork, and of course he's done other books at Marvel, and of course he went on to DC in the late 60s, and also Charlton Comics, and the man had a career, I think it's like 60 years, 62 years. He passed away in 2018, and now that his career is over, it allows people to really take a wide look at the whole spectrum or focus on one part of it, and that's why we're getting books like this out there. So let me put these aside for now. We're definitely going to talk about them. What I wanted to do is just share a few of my other Steve Ditko books. Let me put it sideways so you can see the whole cover. Just due to my setup here, the camera's only so high up with the fixture I have, so it's probably not going to cover the entire book as far as the top and bottom. So I'm going to try to place it, kind of in the center as good as I can, and probably a little bit of glare from the lights, but so there's the cover, The World of Steve Ditko. This book came out in 2008 from Fantagraphics Books. This is back cover. It's a page from Amazing Spider-Man Annual Number 1, the first appearance of the Sinister Six, of which Mysterio was one of the members. And this one, the splash pages where Spidey attacks. But I just love this artwork so much. I'm so glad it's the back cover, just to see it in black and white with the... one of Ditko's hallmarks is character design. And Mysterio, one of the absolute best I think he's ever done. It's definitely one of the best villain costume designs, but it's just a great freaky design with the dome head, the cape with these weird eyeball amulets here holding the cape in place, and then the checker pattern on the pants and the suit, and of course the swirl of smoke and the cape and these funky gauntlets, right? It's just amazing. And then contrasted with the great Spider-Man costume. Anyway, great idea putting that on the back cover. So this book came out in 2008. Actually went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2008 to meet Blake Bell, and he signed it to me, to Javier, best wishes, Blake Bell. So that was cool. I actually interviewed him on a podcast I used to do at the time. So I'm not sure if I met him after we did the podcast, or maybe I met him there and then we did the podcast after. But regardless, I did get to talk to him about his book. So this is the first biography of Steve Ditko, coming out in 2008. And Ditko was still active, definitely still working there in his later years. So this is a true biographic piece because it literally covers the whole lifespan of Dicko up to that point. Literally there's a blown up picture of that's his high school annual photograph, blown up. Not a lot of pictures of Steve Ditko prior to him passing away. But yeah, he grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And again, like any biography, Blake Bell would have done research, either old interviews or articles about Ditko and maybe interviews with people who knew him. And then looking at the records at the high school. There's a class picture. I don't know if you're going to see it here. I'm looking here, trying to see which one is Dicko. Again, I don't want to stick my head in the camera frame. Anyway, I think that young man, that teenage high schooler, turns out to be our hero. Looks like Peter Parker, right? Anyway, so like I said, it covers Dicko's life story, from growing up, the things he did at home, the comics he liked that he read, and then moving to the classic story, right? Moving to the big city, New York. He wants to work in comics. And it's been said a lot about Ditko. He's one of those early creators from the day, from the late 50s. He wanted to get into comics, to just do comics. Because in the old days, comics were often a jumping on point or hopeful jumping on point for artists to let me work comics, and then let me go do some real illustration work for Saturday Evening Post or New Yorker, or like a quote unquote real magazine, prestigious magazine. But a lot of these guys just ended up staying in comics. But Ditko is one of the guys who just no, he wants to go there. I just want to draw comics my whole life, which he did. Like I said, some 60 years of a career. So this comic covers, I think that's his earliest comic work. Like I said, it's a true biography in the sense of it covers the career kind of year by year, following him through the different publishers he's worked with, and again, offering some insights into the art style, what makes a page look like a Ditko page, Ditko-esque. A lot of tropes that he's got. This is an old one here. The mouths, the snapping mouths. It's like the Rolling Stone t-shirt, right? There's so many different tropes, but yeah. And then, moving on to working at Marvel Comics in the 50s with Stan Lee, writer Stan Lee, who hired Ditko to work with him on a bunch of old stories, whether it's horror, mystery, and then Ditko bounced around to other publishers, mainly Charlton. He's got a real long affiliation with Charlton Comics. So yeah, like I said, it just moves through the decades. And then of course we get to look at the angst on these characters here. This guy being confronted by these multiple giant faces. Again, that's a Ditko trope. Really portrayed that, that inner psychological angst really good. Electro, and of course, Spider-Man, 62 to 66. A short amount of years when you think about it. And he only did, 38 issues? 38 issues. The origin story, Amazing Fantasy 15. And then 2 annuals. So barely 40 stories. And, from that, Marvel, would have other artists and writers work on it for decades. But so much of it was built in that early run of 3 or 4 years, which, as you guys probably know Spider-Man. Well, most of you are probably comic fans, but if not, the average person knows Spider-Man through the billion-dollar movies that have been coming out for the last 20 years. Cartoons, toys, cereal, right, T-shirts. So, anyway, when I started seeing pictures of Ditko from high school years, I go, man, he literally drew himself as Peter Parker, or used himself as the model. And you find, in reading the comics and reading about Ditko, you find out that a lot of it was, he would, as the artist, he would base a lot of it just on his own experiences. So it's not surprising, like Spider-Man's got so much DNA in his makeup of coming from Steve Ditko. And then, of course, he had come up with the idea for Doctor Strange. He pitched it to Stan Lee. And this is what he did with it. It made him the Sorcerer Supreme. So, I could talk about, there's all the arguments. I'm sure you've heard of him, or you don't know about him. You should. What's the percentage of creation between Ditko and Stan Lee on the characters? There's also that with Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. I'm not really here to discuss that on this episode. but his imprint is on those comics, not just the guy who just drew the pictures. So, because there were not scripts. Maybe some of you have seen scripts for comics. Very similar to a movie script, but it's a comic script detailing page 1, panel 1, draw this. Panel 2, draw that. Panel 3, draw this. Page 2, draw this. Back in the early Marvel days, they didn't have that. Stan Lee and the artist would sit and come up with an idea, or Stan Lee would say, hey, he should, the character should go here, meet this villain, and then maybe there's this little thing with the side characters on the side, blah, blah, blah. So the artist would go home and draw, expand it out to 18, 20 pages. So I don't know if you know anything about writing or drawing, but when you draw that stuff, not based on a script, you're writing the story as well. So anyway, back to this biography. A lot of nice full page black and white examples of the Doctor Strange art on these 2 pages. And then of course it talks about, very importantly, Ditko's relationship to the philosophy of objectivism, which was founded by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, I guess her name. Ayn Rand. She wrote the books Atlas Shrugged and I can't remember the other one offhand. Is it in here? The Fountainhead. My bad. And then she wrote those books, and also she basically ended up founding a school of philosophy. Just kind of interesting, right? Because you think of philosophy, you think it's founded by, thousands of years ago by the ancient Greeks or whatever. But this is something that's probably started in the late 50s, 60s. I don't know much about the world of philosophy, but I guess you can start your own branch of one, right? As long as whatever you have it formulated out and you have enough writings, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, she founded her own branch, and Ditko's known to be very, very much into it. I don't know if the word disciple or adherent is the right word. He definitely subscribes to it. He's written about it extensively in this later half of his career and through his comics. But this book here is talking about how he approached it, how and if he incorporated into his superhero stuff. There's that beautiful page again. Sorry for just gawking at it. But yeah, the text really concentrates also on the working relationship with Stan Lee and the editors and other writers and artists he worked with throughout his career. So it's a really good book. I mean, I really highly recommend it because it really is. If you want a biography of Steve Ditko, who you've heard about and may know about through his work, you want to find out who he is as a person, at least his history, because Ditko didn't participate in this book. In fact, he was very adamant against it. He called it a poison sandwich, right? I guess, the hard covers are the bread and all the insides the poison. That was Steve's interpretation. He didn't want a book written about him. But at the same time, I'm glad Blake wrote this because it just gives a lot of people, a comprehensive overview of Ditko's life and career. Anyway, so I'm not going to go page by page because I want to share some other books. But it does and then it covers throughout the 70s and Ditko's independent work. Increasingly throughout his career, more and more, like by the time the 80s came along, the mid 80s, he definitely started going into partnership to self-publish his own work with a friend of his, a writer he's worked with, Robin Snyder. So I think they had like a 35-year work relationship, which, provided so much content to Ditko fans. So very important. But, and then Ditko's 90s work, did some work at Marvel. He worked on a Chuck Norris issue or two from the Chuck Norris comic from, the late 80s at Marvel. He also did some WWF comics, if you can believe that, in the early 90s, I think. Early 90s. He did Speedball, one of his last major creations for Marvel. He created this character, Speedball, and I think Archie Goodwin wrote it, if I remember. I might be wrong, but Steve didn't write it, but he came up with the concept of this is some nice pencils of Speedball before they're inked. Look at this. for you collectors out there, he did a Tiny Toons story. Yeah, it's a Steve Ditko doing Tiny Toons for a Marvel comic published, I guess, only in England in the early 90s. So that's, even I don't have that one. Although I do have a Bob's Big Boy comic story he did. Bob's Big Boy, the hamburger chain. They used to have, like, I guess they used to get a free comic at the restaurants for the kids. Anyway, crazy stuff. So anyway, I think the main thing on this book here, Blake's, other than historical retrospective, is, Blake's opinion that Ditko kind of isolated himself, or by concentrating on his philosophical comics, and the way the comics were made, to the point of maybe not even being stories, but just more like editorial cartoons, kind of diminishes his career. But and that's a fair assessment. It's his opinion, Blake's opinion. I look at it differently just as an artist. I mean, yeah, Ditko's audiences got smaller because the fans, let's say Spider-Man fans, the mainstream fans, would not follow him all the time. But Ditko was doing the type of stories he wanted to do. So I have to respect that. Even at the sake of, your audience just, shrinking in size compared to what you were doing with Spider-Man or, your mainstream superhero work. But if he did what he wanted to do as an artist, down to his core, I don't fault an artist for that, It's not our place to say, well, you could have made more money by drawing Spider-Man pinups, whatever. It's just your opinion of somebody's life choice. So that's the thing about the, what the book theorizes there. But like I said, it is a comprehensive review of the man's career year by year, company by company. So it's very valuable in that regard. And then this last section is just like showing a lot of the humorous comics Ditko did over the years. He did have humor. People think he's so serious, but like everybody, I have to assume, like anybody else, any human, you're not just serious, you're not just funny all the time, you're not just angry, you're not just happy, you're all of these. So anyway, I kind of like that he did spotlight this section. Yeah, like a Get Smart comic. I actually have one. I think he did a few issues back in the 60s. There was a couple of comics on the Get Smart, that Don Adams spy series, a comedy spy series on one of the networks. One of my favorite shows. I love the show. And I didn't find out till years later that Ditko did a comic. He also did a Hogan's Hero comic or two. I know the man has got so many deep little avenues, alleyways of his career. So anyway. Oh, and here's the Bob's Big Boy comic, which I do have this. It's just like a real thin, 10 pages or something. But yeah, Steve Ditko did the art. He did the pencil, and then Luke McDonnell inked it. Crazy, right? So, anyway, check out this cover. We'll see this again shortly. This book, I should have looked it up. I'm not sure if it's out of print, but it's been out for years now. So you know how the book market works. Once things are out of print, they get harder to find. So, if you want to read about the comprehensive history of Steve Ditko, please look up The World of Steve Ditko by Blake Bell. Okay, so here's another great book I really love. This one is definitely not going to fit completely in my camera range. I do apologize. Hopefully, you'll see the majority of it. Let me angle this so there's no glare. So look at this thick, giant, massive book. Ditko Unleashed by IDW. Almost 400 pages. And it's big and it's super heavy. Ditko Unleashed, an American Hero. What this book is, there was an art exhibit in Spain, believe it or not. This is cute. The ribbon is black and white. So if you guys know Mr. A with his black and white card, that's a nice little touch. Wow, here's where you would have Steve Ditko sign this book. This book came out in 2016, I believe. So there was an exhibit in Spain, believe it or not. September 2016 to, it looks like January 2017, about 4 months. A huge exhibition of Steve Ditko artwork. Original artwork, probably comics and prints and everything. So this was the companion book for this exhibit. Isn't that awesome? So yeah, I couldn't make it out to Spain that year, unfortunately. But this book, I mentioned the word comprehensive. This is literally covers his entire career up to 2017, and Dicko passed away the year after. So at the time, he was still working on comics. But so the great thing about this book is it's not a deep biography like Blake Bell's book. It, obviously talks about Dicko growing up in Pennsylvania, high school and everything. But what it does, and it's such a great resource, it covers, not exactly year by year, but era by era. Sometimes this, chapters like year by year. But yeah, there's pre-productions of the covers, pages, kind of synopsis of stories. It's like really comprehensive. 54 to 57. And it's in English and Spanish because, like I said, the exhibit was in Spain. But, thankfully, they printed this book in English as well. So it's, it's for both audiences. But this is a favorite book of mine. It's different than the Blake Bell book. It's not as biographical as far as his life story, but it is about his comic work. And again, really detailed. And, there's so much artwork. There's so much art in this book. I don't know if there'll ever be a book with this much Dicko art as far as covering his whole career. Obviously, you can buy the Spider-Man Omnibus, which has all 1,000+ pages of all his Spider-Man work. There's original artwork. I imagine some of these were in the exhibit, the original art pieces. Again, trying to play around here. Hope I didn't mess that up and throw it out of the my predetermined setup here. But again, I'm just trying to give you a quick review of the book, not so much, zoom in on every picture here. So again, 58 to 59, pretty comprehensive. Getting into the Marvel stuff, some Charlton stuff, Monsters, Gorgo, and Conga. I have this cover. I have the magazine, not the original cover. Mad Monsters. Yeah, definitely some of the, what they call the pre-superhero stuff at Marvel. Remember I told you he worked with Stan Lee? So they're doing these monster stories and such. Then, of course, yeah, we're going to move ahead. Boom, 62 to 63, the first year of Spider-Man, creating Spider-Man. The original Spider-Man pages from Amazing Fantasy 15. Reproductions of it, photographs of the original pages. Which somebody, believe it or not, the bombshell news about 10 years ago, somebody had the entire Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, the whole issue. I think it was all the art, all the original art. Someone had it all these years, and they donated it to the Library of Congress, the United States National Museum. So these pages that have been, I guess, missing for decades, that are, I don't know, man, I don't want to exaggerate, but they must be worth, I gotta say, a couple of $1,000,000, like the whole Spider-Man story, the first 11, all 11 pages. I don't even know what it'd be worth. Someone donated it, which is good because now the library owns it, and they'll be there forever, as long as the library's up there before unless that gets attacked and burned down. But yeah, the artwork is there. So my one dream one day is to go to the Library of Congress after all these years of not going, and see all the treasures they have. Go there and I guess you can request to see the pages. You make an appointment, and then I imagine they bring them out in plastic sheets, and you can look at them with someone watching you. I don't know if it's that easy. Maybe you have to be a scholar or something. I don't know. But, they're not meant to be locked away. They're meant to be seen by people. So anyway, here are the pages. So, but again, I'm just going to skip through just for the sake of time, talking about the work he did for zines, fanzines. I'll talk about those after. There's a book on that, believe it or not. Let me skip ahead, right? So Doctor Strange, more original artwork. That's a beautiful cover, The Molten Man. It's not easy to do because it's a black sheet of paper, or, well, maybe he colored it black, inked it black, but then he's got to do the figures in white so it gets printed in color later. That's astounding. That's an astounding cover. A scorpion. But what I want to show you is, like, again, it's not just covering Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, which a lot of books do, and then his stuff at Charlton Comics, does some of it done concurrently with Spider-Man, some of it after he left Marvel and went to Charlton, other companies he's worked with. Yeah, these beautiful ink washes he does, where you get some ink diluted in water, and then you get different shades of black and gray, and then you just brush it on. I mean, that's beautiful work. He's known for doing some fantastic ink wash work, and then he goes over it again with white paint. I don't know if you can how good you can see that, but so yeah, but see how we're moving through year by year almost? 66 to 67. So, I mean, it's amazing because it doesn't just stop at a certain, it doesn't stop at the 70s, it doesn't stop at the 80s. It goes all the way to the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Which I love that because I love all his work. I love the whole scope of his work, his career. I don't just like drop off after, he quit working at Marvel or he quit working on superhero comics. Which, some fans do, and yeah, people can do whatever they want. So, yeah, just like I said, imagine when I first bought this book, I'd go through it much slower and then just kind of enjoy every piece of art, read everything I could, read all the entries here. And then, he worked a lot by the time the 80s came around, mid-80s and beyond. Because he'd worked mostly independently or self-published even. A lot of his work is in black and white. So, I mean, you probably can't see the detail that good, right? Because these are kind of small. But it's some astounding work. So, this covers a whole chunk, right? 79 to 2016. Seeking the Truth. His personal stuff. And working back at Marvel. Machine Man here. Created by Kirby. Kirby did the first 9 issues. Took off. And Dicko came in for about 9 issues, I think. So it's a great run. It's Jack Kirby and it's Steve Ditko. There's not too many books like that out there. It's a great Dracula comic he did. Fantastic. So, yeah. It's, again, look at that. Cover by cover. Different page samples. Working on ROM Space Knight. I may have to do just a whole episode on that comic. It's a late 70s Marvel comic based on a action figure called ROM that didn't do too good, but they made a comic series out of it. It lasted almost 80 issues. There's Ant-Man for all you Marvel movie fans. You may not recognize him, but that's Ant-Man from the comic, the way we recognized him. And yeah, that is independent stuff. And like I said, this covers a lot of stuff that isn't covered a lot in books and maybe articles on Dicko. Because I guess even the people who write the articles maybe weren't into the later stuff, so whatever, but this book covers everything. Yeah, there's a lot of his black and white, independent, self-published stuff that he put out through, with his editorial partner, Robin Snyder. And then still doing some stuff, like for Topps Comics, they did this based on Jack Kirby creations, the Secret City Saga. And then he did something for Fantagraphics. Steve Ditko's Strange Avenging Tales. I love the title. I love this. There's only 1 issue of this. And then 99 to 2000. Now we're pretty much in the era where almost exclusively, I know there's 1 or 2 things he did at Marvel and DC, just publishing his own work. Just the stories he wants to do, the way he wants to do them. No editorial interference. There's Blake Bell's book mentioned down here. So, and yeah, that's it. And then, yeah, covering some of the later stuff that Dicko did in his last 10 years of his life. He did a whole series of these they're called 32-page, they were 32-page comics, so we call it the 32 series. And, yeah, he did, I think, 26 total, I think 26, over a 10-year span, almost 1,000 pages in his 80s and 90s. I mean, that's amazing to me. I love these books. Some of it's a combination of these editorial, philosophical type musings. Some of them are definitely comic book stories, right? Adventure stories, done with panels, different heroes and characters. But a lot of them were editorial style. I call them editorial. Political, cartoony, you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. which that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, those aren't comics, and he's just kind of hitting us over the head with his philosophy. But, you know, again, I don't subscribe to the objectivist viewpoint at all, but it doesn't turn me off from enjoying his work. I like to see what he does, how he portrays his ideas of that philosophy. I can look at it without getting all offended or angered, like I guess a lot of people. But good for me, right? So yeah, I just enjoy the man's work, and it's just great to see what he does, how he does it, and even, you know, why he does it. So yeah, this book covers, like I said, all the way to about 2017. At the time, you know, he was still working, which was great. He's still living. And this book, I gotta tell you, I did look it up. Dicko Unleashed. It's no longer available on Amazon, meaning it's out of print, so it's getting harder to find, disappearing. And if you go to, you know, eBay or places like that, it's definitely, I think it's over $100. So I mean, if you're interested in getting it, yeah, definitely look for it. Look for it, please, because it's going to get harder to find. I don't know if something like that gets reprinted if it was done for an art show, for a exhibit. Here's another interesting book that came out in 2019. I think it was a Kickstarter, if I remember, and I did contribute to it. Regards, Dicko. That's taken from. He was known for writing letters, responding to letters, hundreds or thousands over the decades to fans. Dicko's very private. He's very known for he hasn't done a comic convention since the late 60s. Believe that or not. Yes, that's not I did not misspeak. He did not make really public appearances. Professional, right? I mean, obviously he'd have to go to the store, wherever, go eat, leave his apartment for that. But he was not interested, and kind of just said, no, I'm not doing conventions. I'm not doing appearances, signings. I'm not doing bookstore signings. But over the years, fans would start writing him, and he'd write back. He'd always write back, usually, even if he didn't like the response, because the people ask him, hey, I would love your Spider-Man comic, and what were you thinking when you... And he'd be like, that was done 50 years ago. I don't remember what it was like. So even though the answers could be terse or just let's say they're to the point, some people would like treasure those. Some people would get all offended. It's like, well, you didn't get the answer you wanted, but... So I wrote him once or twice, maybe 3 times. Anyway, what this book is, so this guy here, Jaison Chahwala, I believe, hopefully I'm pronouncing it not too wrong, Chahwala. He's, his little bio on the back, he's a nurse, and he also runs like a food blog. He writes, you know, I don't want to say a foodie, but yeah, he's written about food, and I guess he's talked on TV about stuff about food. So that's cool. But like everybody else, you have a lot of interest, but you can still be a comic fan. So this guy is a big Steve Ditko fan, and this book is really interesting, right? I don't think there's any pictures in it. I don't remember pictures in it. I'm looking through it right now. But so he had like a long multi-year correspondence with Dicko, which like a lot of people did. Again, I only wrote 3 or 4 letters. So, but what this guy did, he just ended up writing a book about his correspondence with Dicko. So I enjoyed the book. I was curious to support it, so I did buy it. Big chunk of it, I think more than half, is just the author telling his life story. I guess he's got to set up the background first, who he is, how he got into comics, whatever. And then, he's a big Spider-Man fan, and then he talks at one point about writing to Dicko. And so he goes over the letters. I think in the back of the book, he prints up transcribed letters. So he'll transcribe the letter he wrote to Dicko, and the response he got back, and then comments about it like, he wrote back right away. He didn't write back for a few months. He didn't like my questions. So the next time I wrote him, I kind of retooled the questions a different way. Anyway, so it's an interesting book. I'm not saying it's the essential book for your Dicko collection. But at the time, it's like, I saw it on Facebook. I saw it on Kickstarter. I go, okay, I've read everything else so far about Dicko. Let me check out this book. So like I said, I honestly, like when I got the book, I thought if the whole book was just the letters, his letters and Dicko's replies, that'd be super fascinating, right? Other than that, we only get him in the back of the book. But there's some interesting stuff, just his perception of Dicko and stuff. he seems to be a bigger, he seems to be a, well, he is a huge Spider-Man fan. And when I read this, I didn't recall him being very receptive or understanding of a lot of his self-published work. So, there's fans like that too. They're just interested in his mainstream work. But anyway, I own this book. I supported it. And this was a bookmark. There's another bookmark too with the Spider-Man face on it. But that's it, probably somewhere in another book of mine. Anyway, so this is called Regards, Dicko. And that's how Dicko would always end his letters. Regards, Dicko. So I like the title. So anyway, it's up to you if you want to check out this book. If you find a decent price copy, whatever. There's that one. And I think here's the last book from the ones I've read. This one here, Steve Ditko in the 60s. That's the official title, I guess. This is on Amazon. That's where I got it from. It just came out last year, I think, 2019 or 2020. So this book is interesting. It's not like a biography of Dicko. This is Dicko artwork from the 60s. So in the 60s, I mentioned earlier, because comics were getting really big, there was that big boom again, with especially the Marvel age of comics. Fantastic Four #1, and then Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man, X-Men. From what we know, the modern age of Marvel started there. So there was a huge boom, and I guess DC started, maybe picking up their game a bit, but Marvel was the king at the time. So there was all these fan clubs, comic fan clubs that basically kids, high school kids, maybe younger, young college kids, and they would put out these little magazines, these little small handmade, they call fanzines, right? A fan magazine. So there was a huge, industry of that, of fanzines. So what this book is. So the fanzines, what this book is comprised of is pretty much all the articles this editor could find. Ballmann, he put this book together. He, I guess he had a collection, or he looked around as many fanzines from the era he could, and then he'd reprint articles from them. These are literally the articles, because you can tell some of these are done on those old typewriters. And they're the articles that talk about, hey, there's this new book from Marvel called Spider-Man. So this whole book focuses on the fan response and the fan history of Steve Ditko showing up on Spider-Man. So it's just fascinating, right? To read the articles by they're kids. And to it's really neat to hear their viewpoint, their opinion on this new weird looking character, Spider-Man. Wrapped up in all this web costume, and, Peter Parker, high school kid with problems, and the aunt, she's always sick, and girlfriend problems. And so I've never really seen that perspective, because we see a lot of, obviously in comics, there's all these historic, like ones I just looked at, adults, scholars looking back 40 years writing about Spider-Man, but this is the actual, in real time, the reaction to the fan base. And the other good thing about it, Steve Ditko would write a lot of these fans. He'd write them letters. They'd try to interview. Yeah, they would interview him. The only time he did interviews, I guess. They'd send him questions. He'd write back the answers. He would submit artwork. Ditko would give out artwork so they could print it in their fanzine. That's amazing. That's a piece for a fanzine. That Spider-Man piece. But yeah, again, a lot of these articles, right? The top 10 comics. People voted. 136 votes for Captain America. Spider-Man is at 128. Favorite heroes. Spider-Man #1 at 113 votes. So this is amazing stuff, because there's no way I'd be able to find these zines. You know what I mean? It's not like they were mass produced. Top 10. But again, reviews of just to hear in real time back then what the audience, the young kids, because that's the audience back then, thought of this new character by this artist Steve Ditko. And like I said, there was trying to find there's a couple of interviews with Dicko, or he would just write into the zine, maybe correcting them about something or just sharing something. So this is a cover art. This is a Spider-Man drawing Dicko gave them for this Crime Stopper zine. So then I think they cleaned it up to print on the cover of this book, right? So anyway, to think that these Teenage kids were getting this Dicko art in the mail for their zines. So here's a letter from Steve. See? Dear Ken, I don't have time to go into detailed criticism. I think Ken was asking for, or Ken Langdriff, wow. He's a big 80s independent icon. I guess he was asking for advice for Steve Ditko on his art. Here's another Dicko drawing he submitted to Aurora, issue 5. Anyway, this book is super fascinating, like I said. Just the perspective of it. It's kind of like the internet at the time, right? But people, they'd have to write in the zines, print them up, and distribute them. So nowadays, we just look online to see what fans are saying about something. And sometimes they could be harsh. I mean, some of the criticisms, some of them could be like, oh, this sucks, or, whatever. But definitely seem to be very intrigued by the new Spider-Man character, the new Doctor Strange character. Steve Ditko, Portrait of the Master. Love that. Yeah, the early Ditko fans. These are the earliest Ditko fans. Well, he had fans earlier, right, from his work in the 50s. But like I said, once superheroes started being the big thing, kids really gravitated to that. And then you got these, these fan clubs. An interview with Steve Ditko. See, these are important to read these because they're so rare. And he did a lot more interviews back then than he ever did after the 60s, which is basically zero after the 60s from what I know. There's some big answers here, some real long answers. So I'd recommend you look this book up if you want to get a copy of this. Spider-Man Battle Royal for Best Mag. Anyway, pretty cool stuff. So this is Steve Ditko in the 60s, 1960s. I just look up Ditko on Amazon, Steve Ditko, and then this book is always on the first page or two. So you can check. This is a really interesting one, like I said. If you're into the historical factor of comics and what fans were saying back in the day and their reactions to Steve Ditko. Again, I have not read these two. Again, I just got them in. This is by as a journalist, I think he owned a comic shop too in England, David Currie. There's a little bio of him in the back. But the main gist of this one is it's a book on Ditko, obviously, because again, this writer, he had a relationship with Ditko over 10 years, writing fan letters back and forth. And he says that he had told Ditko one day he was going to plan to write a book about him, I guess based on those letters. So, take it for what it's worth. So Ditko went along with it. And he kept corresponding with this guy. So, but this book, it looks like it covers the whole history of comics from the point around where Ditko started. So I just skimmed through it, when I first got it. So one of the things is this guy, David, he does print, again, some of the letter. This is the actual letter that Ditko would write. So it's in response to something David wrote. And yeah, I noticed they're seen throughout this book. Of course, there's artwork, right, from the comics that are being covered. There's that Spider-Man first page again. And yeah, there's interviews with some of the people Ditko worked with at the different publishers. So I'm looking forward to reading this again. Letters. I don't know if that's the same one I just looked at. So again, it's a historical perspective on Steve Ditko. There's a photo. I've seen that photograph before, I think, online. Yeah. What's neat about this book, there's an introduction in here at the beginning. Look at this. Look at this. Uncle Steve by Mark S. Dicko. Here's a picture we've never seen. Again, I've had the chance to meet Mark a couple times. He lives out here in LA. He's Steve Ditko's nephew. And I believe that's Mark and his brother. I think his brother is called Steve. Yeah, Mark and Stefan. So there's another Steve Ditko running around nowadays. Mark's brother. But I met Mark recently, after Ditko passed away. It looks like the Ditko family, who've always kind of just, let their uncle just, let him be as far as his work is out there. So, but now they're speaking about him more. They want to preserve his legacy, which I think is great. And Mark said this stuff online. He's kind of, I guess he's kind of like the spokesman, the point person for the family, the estate. And so he got a copy, he was given a copy of this book, and he wrote a nice little foreword for it. But it's, yeah, so I think we're going to be seeing, I think we're going to be seeing more things from the Dicko estate regarding Steve Ditko, just like, with the Kirby estate, Jack Kirby's family, his children, kind of trying to do what they can to protect their father's legacy. I'm glad the Dicko family is doing the same thing for, in this case, his uncle's legacy. And then I believe it's Mark's father. I hope that's not wrong. Mark's father, Patrick, Steve Ditko's brother, is writing again, this has been put online publicly in the Facebook groups. Steve Ditko's brother is writing a biography on his brother Steve, because he wants to set the record straight as far as like who Steve Ditko was just as a person, and Steve Ditko the man is the tentative title of that book. So like I said, I guess like the curtain's being lifted now, I guess, however you want to call it. Dicko was always private, so the only thing we knew about him was whatever little scraps of information. But now the family just kind of wants to, I guess, share more about their uncle. And of course, they're very proud of all the work he's done. So anyway, so this is kind of neat having in the post, now that Dicko's passed away, we have this kind of, I guess, like a new phase, I'd call it. So it's good to see that. It's good to see that. The Dicko, the famous Steve Ditko door, room 715? I should know that by heart. But yeah, I've seen that picture so many times, the door. Anyway, so this book, I'm looking forward to checking it out. And then, the correspondence between Dicko and the author of this book. Another letter. Look at that. So, look at this, another picture from the early 90s or late 90s. Dicko, his two sisters, and his brother. So this is the brother writing the book on his brother Steve. So anyway, this picture is amazing. I really encourage you guys to get this book because, again, and there's the author, David Currie. Reproduction of artwork. Oh, you guys will be familiar with this now. And it's a reprint here of a signature, right? Regards, Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko. I've read a couple letters I have, they end this way too. It's funny, he signs it, and then he prints his name underneath. So even though he's adamant about I don't do autographs, I don't sign books for people and send them back, I won't sign my name on a picture, he always signs his letters, which is kind of funny, right? Like, but it's not an autograph. He's very classic, like, no, letters get signed, but you don't just give out an autograph. I love that about him, very particular person. So this is called Dicko Shrugged, play on the Atlas Shrugged. This is a brand new book, so look for this one. You want a new Steve Ditko biography? Oh, and here's the other one, last one. This one also, like I said, just got it. Mysterious Travelers. There's an old Dicko comic called Mysterious Travelers. So this is Mysterious Travelers. This is written by Zack Cruz. I know Zack through Facebook and such, and then after Dicko passed away in 2018, I messaged Zack, hey, would you like to do a podcast, just you and me? And, let's talk about Dicko. Give us your perspective on his career and such. So at the time, I'm sure he was already working on the book. So Zack is I believe he's a instructor at a university, but he's a scholar on comics, film, American literature, and he's appeared on numerous podcasts. And he wrote this wonderful book. Again, I have not read it, but all the pre-release information I've heard about it. So this book is different than the other biographical books. It's not filled up with a ton of pictures, although there are definitely illustrations in it. But this is definitely a very, very extensive, deep dive. It's a scholarly look at the philosophical underpinnings of Steve's work, right? The objectivism we talked about, and something that Zack recalls. I don't know if it says here, but I remember in an interview. Mystical liberalism. Steve Ditko and the search for a new liberal identity. And it's not liberal like we're thinking of, like politically left wing, because everything I know about Steve, he's definitely more on the right-hand side of the spectrum. But so anyway, I'm going to read. This is the first one I'm going to read because I've just been curious about it for the longest time. And like I said, it's really dives in deep with, illuminated politics and impending cultural change. So it's definitely very scholarly in that regard, which is good because, with so much work that Dicko's done, it definitely, especially the type of work he does, so much of it, almost half his career, very philosophical, political, if you want to call it. It merits this type of very deep, intensive study. Like we just saw this book, about fans, right? But teenage fans writing about Dicko, that's good too. I like all sides of an issue, or studying it from all sides, from just like the fanboy perspective as an artist, and in this case, the long-awaited study or dissection of the philosophy in his work and how he applies it into the stories and such. So this is published by University Press of Mississippi. So it gives you the idea of the type of book it is. According to what Zack said online, he said the sales have been tremendous on this first printing, and I believe he says they're almost out of the hardcover, maybe the paperback too. But he did allude to, again, publicly, I'm not telling any secrets, another printing of this. So anyway, you can look this one up too. It's Mysterious Travelers by Zack, Cruz. Brand new book on Steve Ditko. So this is definitely, it's going to be like going back to school, I think. It's like a textbook in a philosophy class, which I did really good in years ago in my philosophy class. At least one of the ones I took at Cerritos College. Anyway, that's it, right? Let me just leave off here. Let's have a nice visual here. Well, look at this. The spectrum between 1960s, young fans writing about Dicko, and this brand new 2021 release written by a comics scholar, philosophical dissection of the work of Steve Ditko. And there's everything in between, right, with all the other books. So anyway, boy, I did not think I was going to take this long on this video. Hopefully you sat through the whole thing, and hopefully you find it interesting and like my other stuff. But I'll put a link on this video down below, because I did one or two other Steve Ditko episodes, and I'll definitely be doing more, as I mentioned in my New Year's special this year. But yeah, please, if this is the first time you've seen this show, check out that link for the other one. Subscribe to this so you can always be informed of new episodes, and you can see if you're interested in checking out the episode or not. But if you subscribe, you'll always get a little, I'm not going to email you and spam you, but you'll get a little, announcement, new episode up. So that's the extent of me bothering you if you subscribe to my channel. And if you watch this and you have any questions or comments, put them down below in the comment section. I always like to read those. I don't get hundreds of comments, so I can always answer the couple I have. So feel free to start a little conversation if you'd like. And I think that's it. So thanks, everybody. This has been Los Comics TV. A big look at some Steve Ditko books in my library. Thank you.